Comics have always had a pretty rigid structure to them. They've always been and always will be comprised of panels. That's just how they work. Like the Aristotle of comics, Scott McCloud explains in his landmark 1993 book, Understanding Comics, The Invisible Art, the magic of comics happens in the unattractively named but magical gutter, where the phenomenon of closure occurs. The definition of closure being where you observe the parts but perceive the whole. It's a phenomenon where our minds fill the blanks between the panels, making the drawings move in our mind. Gutters, borders that form panels, and closure, they're the mechanics of comics and will always be what make comics work. But what isn't a constant are comics form. In 1992, French art aficionados Georges Perez and Raymond Queneau formed UBAPO, which means this, though I'm not going to say it because it'll just be insulting, but it roughly translates to Workshop of Potential Comic Book Art. It's a comic book movement that aimed to explore and experiment with the medium by applying formal constraints, or a simpler term would be rules. Rules such as make a comic in 5 panels or less, or make a comic that can be read forwards and backwards, or make the same comic but change the words. Arguably an even larger shift in comics form are digital comics, which opens up even more possibilities, such as the infinite canvas theory, theorised by the already mentioned Scott McCloud in his polarising follow-up book to Understanding, Reinventing Comics. The infinite canvas theory works in opposite to UPABO's formal constraints. It liberates drawings from having to be tampered with to conform to an acceptable page size. Instead, a computer monitor is used as a window with which the reader can peer onto a page. And even more futuristic than this is VR comics, the largest endeavour in this area being Oculus's Madefire Studio, which adds motion, sound and depth of field. But whatever the example may be, they're all rather complex. Print comics are still the thing. Well, except in Korea, because Korea are embracing a new type of comic, the ever so simple yet so powerful vertical webtoon. The difference between a webtoon and a normal webcomic is that 1, the comic was made digitally in Korea, and 2, it has a vertical reading layout in which you scroll to read the next panel. But if we were going to define webtoons in more accurate terms, as does the article that inspired this video called Webtoon, a New Form of Graphic Narrative, which was wrote by assistant professor and Korean program coordinator at Washington University, Hee-Kyung Cho. She defines webtoons as neither an equivalent general term like webcomics, nor is it a genre of comics. Rather, the webtoon is a complex system created by the distinctive combination of 2 media, comics and the digital. But as she said in the article itself, webtoons are too understudied to give a definitive definition. But rather than focusing on where to place webtoon in a taxonomy, she focuses on how 2 identifiable aspects set webtoons apart from every other digital comics. 1. Its transmediality, or how webtoons have the ability to spread their narrative over different media, to which she uses the example of the very popular Misaeng in Complete Life, about a failed professional Go player learning how to operate in the adult world of business. Misaeng has a prequel film, a live-action TV series that previews the sequel comic, and epilogue chapters that were created after the end of the first season of the comic, all adding new layers to one story and encouraging cooperation between different media productions. And the second point, Webtoon's vertical reading layout. This vertical reading format was first used in the webcomic Pape and Popo's Memories in 2002, but was popularised a year later with Sungjong Manhwa, or a romance comic, and ever since the format has been organically adopted by nearly all webtoonists. And the webtoon I'm going to use to illustrate how verticality can innovate comics is a favourite of mine for its experimentation in form, aesthetic and its powerful story.